Provinces are beginning to open up vaccine bookings to those 12 and up, and some legal experts say that this might pose an issue for divorced parents who might not agree on the immunization of their children. My next guest knows just how this sort of legal dispute could play out in court. Joining me now from Toronto is Kevin Kaspers. He's a senior associate lawyer at Shulman Partners. Kevin, thanks for your time tonight.
My pleasure.
So vaccines certainly can be a contentious issue. We know that, regardless of whatever illness or disease we're talking about. But how common is it that you have this kind of a disagreement to making medical decisions like this amongst divorced parents?
Well, medical decision-making is one of the major heads of decision-making, but unless there was a medical issue with the child, most parents are not going to be confronted with this kind of decision. Now, all parents separated parents have been thrust into the position of having to make this decision for their children.
So, and it's not just, as you say, all parents are having this, but when you have a situation where there's divorced parents, what are the kind of concerns and questions that might be specific to that dynamic?
Well, the issue with the COVID-19 vaccination is having to make that decision is very polarizing if the parents don't agree. For something like a schedule, a parenting schedule, there can be a compromise. There can be a middle ground that can be found between the parents. There's none of that with the vaccination. If one parent is in support of it and the other is against it, there's no middle ground. One parent is ultimately going to have to acquiesce their position on that issue because the child is either going to be vaccinated or not vaccinated.
We're talking about teens right now, 12 and up. That's who is now eligible in I think across the country, in most provinces anyway. But so at what point can a child actually make this decision for themselves? Because I was doing a little bit of reading, and I don't know if you're aware, but in BC, it actually is up to the child themselves. We have something called the BC Mature Minor Consent Act, which allows for a minor to make an informed consent themselves. Would that be something that would, I don't know, be helpful in these sorts of situations? I feel like it could open its own section of problems.
Absolutely. We have the Healthcare Consent Act that sort of suggests that children of a certain age and maturity have the freedom to and right to make decisions with respect to treatments. Over the last couple of days, there have been clinics that have opened up that have encouraged children from ages 12 to 15 to attend to get this vaccination. And some of them have even said consent is not required. I'm not sure how these clinics are applying the threshold and determining if the children are of an age and maturity level to make these decisions without consent. But I do know that the Toronto Public Health has said that they are not requiring consent for children ages 12 and over, and have cited the Healthcare Consent Act for making that decision. So that sort of throws another element into the mix for parents to deal with. Not only are the parents potentially disagreeing with this issue, but the child might come forward and voice their own opinion. Hey, mom and dad, I feel very strongly about this and I'd like to get vaccinated, or I would not like to get vaccinated. It's a very complicated issue as things start to evolve.
And I think, as things start to evolve, as the vaccine eventually does become, children under the age of 12 become eligible for a shot, whenever that does happen, presumably parents will have, a more significant role, or the consent would be required in those cases. Have you already received calls from clients, divorced couples who are having this as an issue?
Absolutely. I think it's part and parcel of the deal. Separated parents already have several issues that they could potentially disagree on. And this is just another issue where they could disagree on how the child should proceed with the vaccinations. And parents don't know how to deal with it because, like I said, there's no compromise. So it's just created an additional issue that parents have to deal with. If they aren't able to resolve it between themselves or through some sort of family dispute resolution process, arbitration, mediation, they're forced to go to the courts to help them make this decision. And we're seeing more and more of that as this vaccine becomes available to children.
Kevin, so what do you tell the parents when they call you and say we're having this issue? You've just outlined the sort of avenues that they can take, but what's your advice to them?
I mean, it's important, I think, to first figure out why they have a position with respect to the vaccine. Why do they feel a certain way? Why do they feel strongly? Why are they opposed to it? A recent case that looked at this specific issue took a look at one of the parents' background, how they're feeling, how they had reacted to previous requests for vaccinations, the vaccination schedule of the child, and that parent had demonstrated a bias against vaccinations. And the threshold in the court is the best interest of the child. So they are always going to keep that as the basis for any decision they make that relates to the child. And this parent had demonstrated an inability to subjectively decide whether it was in the best interest for the child to be vaccinated with the COVID-19 vaccine, and had a history against vaccines. And so they carved out a specific decision-making ability for the other parent who demonstrated an ability to keep the child's best interest in mind with respect to deciding whether or not the child should be vaccinated. So I think it's important to understand the basis of any parent's decision, and then we can advise them how to move forward. And like I said, the options are very limited, whether it be family dispute resolution, acquiescing their position, or ultimately going to court.
Very limited and potentially very contentious. Kevin Kaspers, thank
Indeed.
you so much for your time. Senior Associate Lawyer at Shulman Partners from Toronto tonight.